misinformation is harmful. I don't think this idea is new for anyone who watches my channel, and especially for anyone who watches my content about absinthe. So I was recently reminded of an interaction that I had about a year ago on Instagram that inspired today's video. So about a year ago, I had kind of a frustrating interaction with someone on Instagram in the comment section of a travel influencer with a focus on restaurants and bars. Thankfully, the influencer did a really good job of dispelling the hallucination myth about absinthe in the video itself, aside from the video of the speakeasy she was in showing the fire ritual, but that's not necessarily her fault. Everything else was fine. But then someone came along and commented this. Whenever I see absinthe, it makes me think of that scene in Moulin Rouge where there's a green fairy flying around as they're frolicking and singing. It was a metaphor for absinthe because it was often called la fée verte in literature for its green color, but people also thought you'd see a green fairy while hallucinating after drinking absinthe. Here we go. So I found this to be really frustrating and I felt the need to respond. And I try not to be overly aggressive. The eternal Libra in me, I always try to take the gentle and diplomatic approach because you can actually win people over instead of making them angry and defensive. When they get angry and defensive, they tend to dig in their heels and believe the myth even harder. So here's what I said in response. Actually, it was named the Green Fairy because fairies were a symbol of artistic inspiration in the 19th century, so due to absinthe being very recognizably green and believed to have opened its drinker up to artistic inspiration, it earned the name the Green Fairy. The belief that it'll make you see green fairies is an oversimplification of what the Green Fairy actually represents. So, I wasn't aggressive, I just stated the facts. I gently told them that what they said was incorrect, so I hoped that that would be the end of it. Then after being called out, they did the furious backpedal, which sometimes can be really amusing. They said this in response. This is very correct and I don't dispute this. I just didn't feel the need to go as in-depth on the topic in a comment about it. I do have a post-grad in art history and literature. It wasn't intended in any way to be misinformed, just accessible, I guess. See, in my opinion, that's even worse. So this person says that they have a post-grad in art history and literature, someone whom you would think understands the concept of symbolism but actively chose to misrepresent absinthe anyway, because it's more fun and accessible. Since when was misinformation fun? I guess I missed out on that. There's a big difference between I don't want to go in depth about this and actively spreading misinformation that you know to be incorrect. I responded, making a point of highlighting the fact that when you spread these myths about absinthe, it really hurts the owners and distillers of legitimate brands. And this eager willingness to spread misinformation about absinthe is why we're here today. So I think one thing that people don't really acknowledge and that I'm hoping will help people realize by the time you reach the end of this video is the damage that misinformation can do to absinthe brand owners and their businesses. So I believe I have a unique perspective on this because I have had the opportunity of befriending and interacting with a lot of absinthe distillers and brand owners. Every reputable absinthe brand is a small business, and many people, including myself, love supporting small businesses and fighting against the things that hurt them. During our trip to France and our brief time in Switzerland, I had the enormous pleasure and absolute privilege to walk through the Combier distillery and watch my friend Ted Bro do his thing. It was absolutely amazing to watch his process and to see how much work goes into making his product. I even got to help work on product in the distillery as well, and that was something else. Wow. And I also met and had dinner with the owner of the Combier distillery as well, and that was also really cool. So the owner, Franck, actually did talk a little bit about how both he and Ted were affected by the raid from the French government when their absinthe product was seized in 2007, again, due to the long-held toxic beliefs about absinthe being a dangerous drug. Ew. And to Ted and Franck, merci beaucoup for having us at Combier. That was absolutely amazing. I will never ever forget that. I cannot wait to come back. And while we were in Switzerland, I was invited to the Cros de la Bouillon distillery, more famously known for making fine products like La Clandestine. So That's the distillery that makes it. And I got to see things behind the scenes. I had a wonderful tour, a little absinthe tasting, and I was thrilled to listen to Claude Delay tell his story of distilling absinthe even before the Swiss absinthe ban was lifted. So that was pretty cool. And Claude and Alan, if you're watching, thank you so much for having us. That was wonderful. Again, I cannot wait to come back. Everyone that I met over in France is begging me to come back. Many distillers, not just Ted and Claude, have shared their experiences with me, and I'm really glad that they have, because I really want to help them out and, you know, make a difference and hopefully help with stopping the spread of misinformation. It's not going to happen anytime soon, but I want to make an impact. Many of these brand owners, on top of the painstakingly beautiful work and passion that they pour into their products, have the added weight that distillers of other spirits like gin, whiskey, tequila, and vodka don't necessarily have to carry. They have the added responsibility and duty to dispel misinformation about absinthe. I very much share in their desire to help destigmatize absinthe and make it more accessible, and to help people understand it more so that they're not so afraid of it or so quick to poo-poo it just because the hallucination myth is not true. So, as an aside, I do want to point out that misinformation spread by the general public isn't the only culprit here. There are a handful of absinthe brands, mostly faux absinthe brands or crapsinthe brands, that spread this misinformation as well in order to profit off of the ignorance of the general public. I talked about one particular brand a little while ago. If you want to see that video to learn more about their tactics, I have it linked in the description below. And while it might seem like cute, lighthearted fun to perpetuate these myths, or perhaps you may want to seem cool and knowledgeable, or maybe you're bragging to your buddies or some girl you're trying to impress about the time that you went to Amsterdam and had absinthe and trip balls so hard on it, the more you engage in spreading these myths, the more it hurts brand owners and distillers of genuine absinthe and their business. Yeah, it's really not helpful. Not at all. So here are 7 myths that hurt absinthe distillers and brand owners. So myth number 1. Wormwood is a psychedelic or hallucinogen. So as we've discussed in my video calling out that one particularly notorious absinthe brand, wormwood is not a hallucinogen or psychedelic. You would not believe how many people are still under the impression that wormwood is still banned in the US due to its alleged psychedelic or hallucinogenic properties. Wormwood was used as a medicinal herb for thousands of years, mainly to treat stomach and digestive issues, act as an anti-inflammatory, and to basically just cleanse the body. Thanks to people insisting on believing that wormwood is hallucinogenic, one man in his 30s in the US in 1997 ingested essential oil of wormwood, believing it to be absinthe, or possibly believing it to be hallucinogenic, which landed him in the ICU for a couple weeks. Love that. I will leave a link for that article in the New England Journal of Medicine in the description below if you are interested in checking that out for yourself. Wormwood is absolutely not a hallucinogen or psychedelic. Thujone, the active ingredient in wormwood, is a neurotoxic convulsant, not a recreational drug, no matter what the crapsinthe brands will insist on to shill their swill. It's kind of fun to say. It will cause symptoms like tunnel vision, seizures, kidney failure, renal failure, nausea, vomiting, vertigo, and ultimately death if you have too much. When wormwood is distilled properly, there are only trace amounts of this compound present in absinthe because distillation does a great job of taking this compound out. You would die of alcohol poisoning many times over before you'd feel anything from the thujone, which, after what I just told you, you probably don't want to be feeling anyway. Any properly made absinthe is distilled, so no, soaking herbs in vodka and adding food coloring and sugar does not count as absinthe. So if people are going to insist that wormwood is hallucinogenic, it's a nice counter-argument to let them know that no one in history has ever reported tripping balls from their classic gin martinis. So vermouth is what is in a classic gin martini, and it is made from wormwood and gets its name from the German word for wormwood, which is Vermouth. Other spirits like Amaro, Campari, Coque Americano, things like that, also have wormwood and are widely sold in the US today. So clearly, wormwood isn't a problem. Wormwood in and of itself is not a problem. Absinthe is no more dangerous or toxic than any other alcohol. Also, I would like to point out that vermouth wasn't banned for almost 100 years. Something to think about. Myth number 2, any brand that you can get in the US isn't real, and real absinthe in Europe is hallucinogenic or trippy. So again, absinthe isn't hallucinogenic, wormwood isn't either, and this is just more nonsense pushed by the crapsinthe brands to sell their product, and unfortunately some ill-informed customers spread this myth around as well. Some of the crapsinthe brands have even bought spaces in the Google algorithm so that their brand populates in the search results first and informs customers that absinthe is still banned in the US, even though the 1912 ban was lifted in 2007, in order to coax uninformed customers into buying their subpar products. That's really shady, dude. I don't like that. The Czech Republic is especially notorious for capitalizing on this, making absinthe in name only, which in reality is just blue-green dyed flavored vodka with an inflated alcohol content, lit on fire and served with the false promise of hallucinations. Absinthe in the US must have 10 parts per million of thujone to be permitted here, but I hope that will eventually change so that more brands can be imported here. That would be great. And in Europe, the thujone limit is 35 parts per million. According to scientific testing, these are very similar levels to what it was in the 19th century at the height of absinthe's popularity. And as we've discussed before, again, thujone is irrelevant. In properly made absinthe, there is not nearly enough thujone to really make a difference in how you feel, and how it would make you feel if you had too much of it is not something you would want to feel anyway. And we also know that more thujone does not make absinthe more authentic. It is really so inconsequential and irrelevant. Myth number 3. Absinthe was hallucinogenic in the 19th century, but it isn't anymore, and therefore modern absinthe isn't authentic. The Instagram interaction that I mentioned earlier is one such example of this myth being spread. One of my online friends even told me a story. He was in a liquor store buying a bottle of Lucid, and he asked the owner why people aren't buying absinthe. The store owner said, and I quote, "People come in, look at it, and their stupid friends will say, 'Put it down, it won't make you trip balls,' and then the person puts it back on the shelf to collect dust," unquote. I find it painfully ironic that the hallucination myth that was initially perpetuated in the 19th century to dissuade people from drinking absinthe is still effective, but only because people are disappointed that it won't make them trip balls. I hate it here. So this hallucination myth is definitely harmful to brand owners. People genuinely think that modern absinthe doesn't have wormwood and therefore isn't real absinthe, which, to be fair, they are correct that if absinthe doesn't have wormwood, it's not real absinthe. They're correct in that. But I really don't understand this attitude of what's the point of drinking absinthe if it won't make you trip balls? If that's your argument, then what's the point of drinking wine, beer, tequila, whiskey, gin, or other spirits if you won't trip balls? Like, to me, that literally doesn't make any sense. So, brand owners from Ted Bro of Jade Liqueurs and Lucid Absinthe to Claude Bouillon of La Clandestine to Stefano Rossoni of the very fine Rossoni Absinthes from Italy have stated how much this belief about modern absinthe being inauthentic really hurts their business. I often like to tell people who insist that absinthe was hallucinogenic back in the day that I've had absinthe that was made back then and I still haven't tripped balls. And usually at that point their eyes start to glaze over and they're just like, what? It's kind of funny to see their reaction. I also find it kind of concerning that people are desperately trying to conflate opium den culture with absinthe culture in the 19th century. They seem to think that in France, where people were drinking the most popular alcoholic beverage in the Western world at this time, were hiding in seedy, dicey, hidden dens, drinking absinthe and tripping balls. Which, that's kind of weird. We have so many paintings and photographs of people of all genders and all walks of life enjoying absinthe out in public. Not one person tripping balls in those photographs or paintings. Isn't that weird? And just to review, the myth of hallucinations originated from people of low socioeconomic status slowly being poisoned by cheap, toxic, adulterated knockoffs of absinthe being sold, not the Thujone in Wormwood. The wine lobbyists who were trying to get absinthe banned would try to say that wormwood was the cause of the delirium being reported, since wormwood is an absinthe but not much of anything else at the time, so it painted all absinthe, reputable or not, with the same brush. It was also people suffering from late-stage alcoholism being labeled as absinthism that helped to contribute to this myth. There's also a fascinating piece of forgotten history that ties into the hallucination myth, which is really, really interesting. Ted has talked about this during my interview with him, as well as other interviews and masterclasses that he has given. About a century and a half before the absinthism scare in the late 19th century and early 20th century, there was a phenomenon called the gin craze. There were toxic, adulterated knockoffs of gin floating around, and this was affecting the same group of people that the absinthism scare was affecting, which were alcoholics of low socioeconomic status. Eventually, this issue was resolved with regulation, and the widespread belief of gin being toxic, deadly, and causing delirium and seizures stopped. So, legitimate absinthe distillers in the late 19th century and early 20th century were actually fighting for regulation of absinthe products in opposition to the possibility of the looming ban, but unfortunately, the French government would not let that fly due to the French wine lobbyists who were trying to demonize absinthe, would lose legitimacy for the reasons that they were trying to get absinthe banned if it just got regulated. So it would essentially make their argument that absinthe is toxic, causes delirium, all that good stuff. That would just disappear. It's amazing how intertwined ugly politics and greed are in the history of absinthe. Like, wow. So, myth number 4, absinthe is gross and needs sugar. I'm gonna let you in on a really big secret. Come close, come close. Are you ready for this? I don't think you're ready. When absinthe is made properly, it's actually really naturally sweet. Don't tell anyone. Just kidding, of course. So anyone who is telling you that absinthe is gross has either had a subpar brand, had absinthe in a shot, or possibly both. If someone tries to tell you that absinthe is gross, what I like to do is ask them what their experience with it was. If it was on fire, in a shot, or a subpar brand, or a combination of the three, invite them to try it the proper way with a good brand with the French drip preparation ritual. Continuing on the subject of absinthe and tasting good, absinthe that already has sugar in the bottle should be an automatic red flag. So absinthe is a spirit, but if there is sugar added to the spirit, it is no longer absinthe and is classified as a liqueur. Along that same line, absinthe should not need sugar to be drinkable. And speaking from personal experience, any brand owner who insists that you have to drink their absinthe with sugar is trying to hide bad distillation. So sugar was indeed used during the height of absinthe's popularity in the 19th century, but it was not to cover up the bitterness of absinthe as most people think nowadays. It was actually to cut the bite of the high alcohol content of absinthe. Again, when absinthe is distilled properly, it should not be bitter. If it is incredibly bitter, that's another red flag. For a good while, I actually did have some people criticize me for not using sugar during my absinthe reviews, which is hilarious because I did start off my absinthe reviews with sugar for the first couple of years, but then some people with more experience did steer me in the correct direction. Once I explained that one of the tests of a true quality absinthe is if it's sweet without sugar, those who initially criticized me for not using sugar understood my reasoning behind it. As a matter of fact, when Kenny and I attended the Absinthe Festival in Pontarlier during our adventures in France, sugar was not presented. It was just literally a giant water fountain. No joke. This thing was huge. So sugar or no sugar should be a matter of personal preference, not a requirement to enjoy or prepare absinthe. Myth number 5. The fire ritual is traditional or proper. It really, really isn't. So we have discussed this previously, but it bears touching on again for this video. The fire ritual is not traditional and was only invented to make faux absinthe look cool. We do not have any photographic or artistic evidence of the fire ritual being used to prepare absinthe from the 19th and early 20th century. This was not a thing until absinthe brands in the Czech Republic in the 1990s made faux absinthe to lure in American tourists with flames and false promises of hallucinations. So, because faux absinthe doesn't cloud when water is added due to it not being made properly, the next best thing to make it look cool is to light it on fire, of course. So this belief definitely does hurt absinthe brand owners who make legitimate products, because the average consumer is not necessarily going to distinguish between this is a faux absinthe or bohemian absinthe, so it should be set on fire, and this is a high quality absinthe, so it should not be set on fire. The average consumer is not going to make that distinction. So because this is believed to be the proper method of preparation, it is indeed flashy and will attract tourists. Whether you're in New Orleans or in Prague, people think that this is the right way to do it. So many brand owners have talked to many bars about how they don't want their product prepared this way, but unfortunately many bars continue this practice. It is quite a shame. So here's how I like to think about it. Imagine you're an artist and someone commissions you to paint a painting for them, and you dedicate a lot of effort, hard work, and attention to detail into it because, painting is something that you really love, and having the chance to create and have someone pay for your services is pretty cool, right? So you finish the painting, give it to your customer, money exchanges hands, and the customer literally takes the lighter and sets the painting on fire right in front of you. Ouch. So some people would argue that, the artist got paid either way, so what's the difference? True, but I imagine that there are very few people out there who would be okay with their hard work being set on fire just because it looks cool. And that's exactly how absinthe makers and brand owners feel about their product. So really, you can tell that when you're talking to an absinthe distiller about their products, they really do put a lot of care and dedication and attention to detail into it. And for someone to take all that hard work and just set it on fire because it looks cool, I wouldn't be a fan of that either. So bartenders can be particularly helpful in this issue. If a customer tries to insist on you doing the fire ritual, instead of just saying something like, it's dangerous and our boss won't let us do it, which I actually have heard a bartender say this once when asked why they don't do the fire thing, it kind of implies that you would do it that way if you were allowed to. And honestly, I think a better approach is maybe you can also include, as part of your reasoning, that's actually not the correct or traditional way of preparing absinthe, so that you have an opportunity to also educate the consumer. Myth number 6. It's okay to buy faux absinthe brands to start out your absinthe journey. This is a point of contention for me. So I've seen this kind of going around, particularly on Reddit. You'll get some newbies who will come in, show us pictures of their absinthe selection at their local liquor stores, and even after getting recommendations from commenters, will still pick up the subpar or faux absinthe brands. Usually it's because it comes with its own absinthe spoon. So some in the comments will say something like, return it and pick up X brand instead, but others will say, that's a good absinthe to start out with. Oh boy. So, if something is literally classified as an inauthentic version of the product you're trying to buy, then by all accounts, it's not really a good start, is it? Even if you spend the money on that subpar product once and then buy better brands after that, that is still money going to the subpar brand and not supporting the genuine brands, which is part of the reason why I am really adamant about trying to support the genuine, authentic brands as much as you can. So if someone messages me on like Instagram or something and they're just like, oh hey, these are what are available at my local liquor store, which one should I pick up? I am anxious to jump on that and tell them which one to get. Because I want to support the genuine brands. They really mean a lot to me. Listen, we've all been there. I've even been there at the beginning of my absinthe journey almost a decade ago. Wow, it's crazy. I've been drinking absinthe for almost a decade. Crazy. I didn't have the guidance community or resources back then that I do now, and nowadays, if you know where to look, you will be able to find a lot of really helpful information about brands to buy at your fingertips. You know, this is the age of the internet. You should be able to find the information that you need. So at the beginning of my absinthe journey, I was living in a small town at the time, and I was shocked that my local liquor store even had absinthe to begin with. If you don't know any better and don't have any options or resources available, that's understandable. It's a journey. But if you ask for advice, people are recommending reputable brands for you to start with, and you still pick the subpar brand and being told that that's okay, that definitely hurts the makers of authentic absinthe. Another thing I didn't really think of that my friend Alan Moss of the La Clandestine team pointed out to me while I was putting this video together is that the crapsynth brands piggyback off of the progress that the reputable genuine brands have made. So I would much rather my dollar go to the good genuine brands than to the greedy and unscrupulous crapsynth brands. Ew. These faux absinthe brands are often artificially sweetened and contain petroleum-based dyes to unnaturally color their absinthe because, again, they're not made properly. That alone should make you want to pick up a better brand. Most Total Wine locations do stock Lucid and La Clandestine, so, you know, La Clandestine comes in the very pretty bottle right here. It comes from Switzerland. I've been to the distillery where this is made, so it's a good product. Trust me on this. And then here is Lucid. I have also been to the distillery where this is made. So again, this is a wonderful place to start if you're not sure. And again, most Total Wine locations will carry these. So Lucid and La Clandestine are wonderful places to start, and, you know, just ask around about it. Don't be afraid to ask questions. And oftentimes, this is the part that really makes me mad, Total Wine is charging like Jade level prices for a particularly unscrupulous brand that they stock, if you know, you know, which is completely unacceptable. So one analogy that Ted Bro often makes is if you walked into a liquor store to buy a nice like $50 bottle of red wine, but you look at the back of the bottle and find that it was actually white wine dyed red, would you still buy it? I know I certainly wouldn't do it, and I don't think most people would either. And the same applies to absinthe, but it's really interesting that people will make excuses for absinthe in terms of excusing bad quality, and I don't understand why that is. All right, and the last myth that hurts absinthe business owners is that absinthe is too expensive. People often tell me that they don't bother buying absinthe because it's expensive compared to other spirits. When you think about how much use you can get from a bottle of absinthe compared to other liquors, it really isn't as expensive as it appears, especially when you factor in that most of the legitimate absinthe brands on the market range between 53% to 72% alcohol by volume. So the alcohol content is higher than the 40-ish alcohol content of like whiskey, vodka, gin, tequila, etc. So my friend Stefano Rossoni of the excellent Rossoni Absinthes from Italy also gave his input on this. He says, quote, people comparing the price of a bottle of absinthe one-to-one with the price of other spirits and then complaining that absinthe is too expensive. Meanwhile, failing to realize that with a 50 cl bottle of absinthe, you will make 2 liters or more of absinthe to drink once you dilute it with the appropriate amount of water. Once you compare the price of a bottle of absinthe to 4 bottles of a decent spirit or even a good wine, you will see that even the more expensive absinthe is very reasonably priced. And that is without accounting for the minuscule scale of production, which for any other products usually results in stratospheric prices. And this is literally just in reference to the traditional preparation of absinthe and not, cocktails, because absinthe also goes a long way in cocktails as well. It's pretty cool. So absinthe may not appear as expensive as people think it is. So where do we go from here? What can you do to help good absinthe brands? So first of all, if you do see someone spreading that misinformation online or in real life, gently correct them about it. Don't be rude or argumentative. Be diplomatic. Encourage them to do more research. Maybe even direct them to check out the Wormwood Society for more information and myth busting, and maybe even brand recommendations. And that's another thing where you can really help absinthe brands. You can make really glowing, detailed recommendations for the absinthe brands that you enjoy. So like Lucid Absinthe Supérieure, La Clandestine are wonderful brands that you can start your absinthe journey with. And of course, I cannot recommend the Rossoni absinthe enough. Clone Opal is another one that I really love. Again, you can check out my playlist of absinthe reviews that I have on my channel, and I also created a kind of my top 5 favorite absinthes playlist that you can check out as well. So you can also help to improve the bar culture around absinthe. So if you go to a bar and order absinthe and the staff insists on serving it to you with the bohemian or fire ritual, try to tell them as quickly as you can that you prefer to drink it the proper traditional way and you don't feel comfortable with the fire method because of it being dangerous. So sometimes if you present it that way, maybe something will click in their head and they'll be like, oh, okay, got it. And then another good thing is to leave good reviews of good establishments that serve good brands of absinthe and prepare them the proper way. If a place does serve subpar absinthe or does the fire ritual, talk about them too, but please don't be nasty in your reviews. So you could say something like, this place seems pretty cool, I like the vibe, I just wish that they had a better selection of absinthe brands and didn't do the fire ritual. Bartenders can also really help in this matter. You can reach out to the owners of legitimate brands to stock those products on your shelves, and keep in mind that you are in a really good position to educate your bar patrons about absinthe. You're right there. And of course, if you have any other recommendations for helping spread the good word about absinthe and fighting misinformation, please leave them in the comment section below. So, with all that being said, thank you so much for sticking with me to the end of this video. I know it was kind of long, and honestly, this video was a lot of work, and I'm really hoping that what I said in this video will help things click with certain people, especially the ones that are very much intent on continuing to believe the misinformation, or if they know that it's false, but they continue to spread it anyway. I don't understand why people do that. It's exhausting, but this is why I do what I do. It's really important that we not only support the brands that we love and enjoy and tell everyone about them and recommend them to our friends, but it is also really important to support the work that they do in educating the general public about absinthe, because ultimately it helps them, it helps all of us, it makes absinthe a little bit less stigmatized and a little bit more available. So thank you so much to everyone for watching, and make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on that bell for notifications so that you can be informed every time I post a video about absinthe, the goth subculture, gothic literature, all that fun stuff that we love. Thank you so much to my patrons every single month for your support. I cannot tell you how much I appreciate it. I literally can't do what I do without you guys. And to everyone else, you're amazing, I love you, and I will see you guys next time. Bye!